So let's turn our attention now to the Kanban approach, Kanban methodology using Jira. So in a previous demo, previous video, I gave you an overview on how to set up a Kanban board using Trello. Let's now look at the same approach. Again, the Kanban methodology doesn't change, but we're going to look at how to do that in Jira itself, which is a much more powerful tool than Trello itself. So the first thing that you need to do is, as instructed, create a free account in Jira. All those instructions and the ability to do so can be found on Atlassian's homepage. And once you've created your account and you log in, and it depends on whether you are using a desktop app or if you are logging in through the web application itself, you may see things just a little bit differently, look and feel, but the functionality is the same. So on the right-hand side, we'll now create a project. So let's click there. And what you'll see is by default, it gives you the software development templates, this Kanban, Scrum, which we'll look at in a separate video, and bug tracking, which is not applicable to what we're doing here today. On the left-hand side, there are many more templates that you could take advantage of. We're not going to go through any of them with the exception of one, which is a project management template. And I'll have a short video on that shortly as well. So in our case here, we're going to look at Kanban. So let's click on that particular template. And what you see here is, again, just a little bit of an overview on Kanban itself. And it doesn't hurt to read through this because I think it clarifies some of the concepts we may have spoken about in class. It's Japanese and it means visual signal. It's about visualizing project work, limit work in progress, maximize efficiency. You can increase planning flexibility, reduce bottlenecks, promote transparency throughout the development cycle. And then a few other things around how to use the board to limit work in progress, how to track. And if you do want to learn more outside of this video, you can just click on that link and it will take you to a robust amount of material for your reading pleasure. The other thing that I wanted to make mention here is, and again, if you read through Kanban boards, and particularly how Jira has structured these, you'll see that this template makes use of the following issue types. Without going into too much detail, I want you to think of epics as a collection of stories and or tasks. So epic represents, let's say, a deliverable, project charter, a plan, a stakeholder register. It could be a risk management plan, whatever deliverables exist within our project. And that epic can be decomposed into smaller components of work, in this case, stories or tasks. And I often use tasks instead of stories, but again, it depends on your approach. And those can be further subdivided into subtasks, which we'll see. And by default, the workflow that's established here is the to-do, in progress, and done workflow, which can be changed, and you'll see shortly how to go about doing that. So let's just use the template. It's going to ask you to select between a team managed and a company managed project type. I like to select, for my purposes and the demo purposes, company managed. I find that I have some further flexibility, but again, by default, I'm the admin. If it's a team managed project, and if you want to give flexibility to anyone on your team to set up and maintain, then you might want to choose this option. I would say when you're first playing around with Jira, try to do both and see which one works better for your purposes. So let's select company managed project. It's going to ask us to provide a name. I'm just going to call it simple Kanban demo 2021. automatically sets up a key. And again, you can look at this as just a descriptive prefix for your project's issues to recognize work from this project. So if you have many more projects that you're tracking, this allows you to know that this is part of this particular project. You can attach issues from one project to another, but again, we're going to go into too many complex details, and I'll just leave that for now. But that's just something to be aware of. So let's hit create, and by default, you're going to enter this view where you see your Kanban workflow, the backlog, selected for development, in progress, and done. Now, if you're not happy with these particular columns and the naming of these particular columns, you can always change them. You can add additional columns to your workflow if it's necessary. And the way we do that, and I'll show you very quickly here, is a little 3-dot icon. You'll see various menu items. Let's click on board settings. And on the left-hand side, there's multiple settings for this Kanban. We're not going to look at all of them, although we will in this demo look at a few. Columns, swim lanes is one, and the roadmap is a third. So over here, you'll see this is the workflow that's been established by default. Backlog selected for development, in progress, and done. You can change statuses and you can add columns if you would prefer. So leave the statuses as they are. Let's add a column. Let's call this the on hold column. I already had that in from previous, so it kind of remembered it. Let's add it, and you'll see that we now have a fifth column for which tasks, work can flow all the way to completion. And if you have watched the Trello demo around Kanban and setting up a Kanban board, I talked about what an on hold column may be useful for in terms of a step in the workflow. And this is if there's a bottleneck or if a particular task that you've taken and brought into in progress can't be done because something else needs to be done first. So there's a dependency that what you weren't aware of. You may be able to move that to on hold, work on the prerequisite, complete that, and then move the work that was in progress that was put on hold back to in progress to work on it and move it through the final steps of the workflow. So having done that, let's go back to our board. And now we are ready to add work to our Kanban board. We'll do that in the next step. So let's now add work to our board. But first, I noted that I have a spelling mistake in my project title. I felt like I want to correct it. Maybe this is an opportunity to, again, demo where we can go and make some of these administrative changes. So on the left-hand side here, there's a project settings tag, and you can just simply go here, change that, make sure everything is good, save our details. You can also change the avatar. Okay, now that we're good with that, let's go back to our Kanban board and let's add work. So the way that we add to this Kanban board is by using the create functionality above here in our menu. And by default, it allows us to create epics, provide an epic name and a summary. I'll go through that very quickly. But if you wanted to create tasks, stories, or bugs rather than an epic, you can. And then once you know various tasks belong and can be grouped together into a particular deliverable, you can always go back then and create the linkages of the of the task or the story to a particular epic. So, let's assume, and this is one of the things that I'm going to encourage students to do, is before you start to just, arbitrarily or ad hoc add work to a board, it does pay dividends to actually think about how you're going to plan out the work, how you're going to decompose the work into deliverables, i.e. what needs to be done. You may want to do this outside of Jira. I sometimes use sticky notes on a whiteboard or on a wall, and I kind of just organize what needs to be done, brainstorm all of those particular deliverables or tasks, and then group them together, similar to what we would do in a WBS development cycle. And once you've got that sort of mapped out, it's much easier going into Jira and then mapping that work into Jira rather than just trying to work it through. It's not wrong to do it directly into Jira, but I do believe it's wrong or much more difficult to do it directly in Jira without giving it some forethought first and foremost before you go ahead and sort of plan out your work. So in this case, let's keep it at the epic level. And I said, let's talk about sort of deliverables. Now I already have set up previous demonstrations, and so there's going to be drop downs available to me. It makes my life a little bit easier for this demo. So we'll pick Project Charter as a deliverable. Let's just say it is the summary. It is okay. Now keep in mind this summary is what's going to show up on your card. So I kind of made it a little bit long here, but that's deliberate. Again, kind of thinking about this ahead of time, and maybe even keeping it the same. Maybe instead of it is required to create a project charter to initiate a project, maybe keep it to develop project charter. Okay. You can add files here. You can always go back and add to a particular card later on. You can provide a description. You can assign it. You can change the issue type. Again, you can assign it to various team members. And again, I only just have myself here. Change the priority. You can assign a label to it. Okay, and let's just hit create. And there's our develop project charter. The epic is project charter. And there's our first epic. Now what we can do is, if you would like, and let's just look at this, you can create tasks within the epic itself. So if you look at this, and it looks coincidentally enough like a work breakdown structure, little graphic there. And so it automatically defaults to task. And so similar to what we did in the Trello demo, let's maybe break down the charter into its components. And so we have, now write description. Define objectives and success criteria. I won't do too many of these, just to give you a feel for how to sort of break down the work. Identify and list high-level requirements. Sorry, high-level. Yeah, we can do actual requirements. I was thinking about risks, but we can do this, and we can identify risks and create a risk register. Oh, actually, we want to just identify risks. Creating a risk register can be a separate deliverable, so let's just identify risks. Okay, I think that's good enough for now. So let's close this off. Now, what I didn't do is I didn't give these due dates, and we can, but for now, maybe it's just a good idea of defining the work and all of the underlying work that needs to happen. Let's create one more epic here. And this one will be, let's do this one as requirements. So we can identify and document all project requirements. Okay. And there's the requirements epic. And maybe, now that we're into it, let's create a stakeholder register, and then we can say identify and document all project stakeholders. Okay, So we have our epics. Now I didn't break down the other epics into tasks, so I'll leave that for this particular demo. The process is the same as I just demonstrated for the project charter, but I wanted to have a few epics. We may still need to break down a couple of these just to show you the ability to create swim lanes, and I'll leave that for a second, and if we have to, we'll go back to that. But here's our backlog of work that needs to be done, various subtasks. And then we can move these through the workflow as we did in Trello. Pull from the backlog, select it for development. When that work is being actively worked on, it can move into progress. If there's any bottleneck or constraint that prevents that work from completing, we can move it to on hold, do whatever prerequisite is necessary, move that prerequisite through into the completed status, go back to work on that particular task that was on hold. So we can move that back into in progress, and then we can move that into the completed or the done status when the work is done. Okay. So now let's look at a couple of different areas within Jira that give us a little bit more flexibility in managing the work and seeing potentially timelines or adding due dates and looking at a timeline. So on the left-hand side here, you have a roadmap view of the project. Now, before I click on that, for me, I know that it's enabled, but there may be in your initial login, maybe the roadmap functionality is not enabled for particular boards. What you may want to do is if you don't see the roadmap, again, board settings, go to the roadmap functionality and make sure that this is clicked on so that you can be able to take the work that you are developing in your board and showing it on a Gantt-like chart, or in this case, roadmap. And you can see the work visually in terms of how it's progressing, and you can schedule and work and adjust the schedule directly in the roadmap. So just make sure that that's turned on. So let's go back to our project. And if it's turned on, if we click on a little roadmap view, this is what you'll see. You can, if you recall, for Develop Project Charter, we had created some tasks within that particular epic. And so you'll see them here. Now there's nothing here yet, okay? But when I scroll over, the bar is shown, and I can, again, move that around and give it a particular schedule. I can adjust the length, the end date, I can adjust the due date, sorry, the start date and the due date. One thing to note within the free version of functionality here, that the tasks themselves do not have a bar, a representative bar. So we'll leave that for the time being. Okay. In here too, you can, instead of going back to your board, you can create epics directly from here. So again, if you want to do that, I won't create any further epics. Within each of the epics, you can create tasks, or as they call it, child issue. So again, by default, I think it comes at the start. Let's change that to a task. And within identifying document, all project, I'm just going to have a look at this one. I can't remember which one this was. Project requirements. Let's go to the stakeholder one. So identify document, all stakeholders. So let's work on that one. Only because it's part of the initiating project phase rather than the requirements. So again, what needs to be done, maybe what we need to do is interview the project sponsor. Maybe we also need to create a survey and issue to various teams, collect information, and create stakeholder register. Okay. What I wanted to show you here too is if you click on create survey and we have issue to various teams, you actually can create subtasks for this. So for example, If you have multiple teams that you want to issue the survey, so it could be, issue survey team one, issue survey to team two, and so on. So you can actually create subtasks. Again, the other one of the limitations on the free version is that those are not going to be present and visualized here on your roadmap. So just keep that in mind. It only goes down to the task level, but you're always able to go into there and have a look at those individual issues. And you can create filters. We're not going to go through that with the demo, but you actually can create different views where you can see all of your issue types, and you can collect them in various ways. And so if you want to track them or see what the status is, there's ways of collecting that work. For us, it's just setting it up. I'll invite you to explore on those on those options, or read up on them a little bit more. So here's our roadmap. Again, if we go back to our Kanban board, okay, we'll see that all of that information is reflected on the Kanban board. Now, one of the things that I wanted to show you outside of the roadmap itself and creating subtasks is the ability to take this simple Kanban board where all of the epics and all of the tasks and subtasks are kind of lumped all into one. You may want to split them and be able to show horizontal lines rather than just vertical lines, and so we call that swim lanes. I'll show you what that means in just a short second here. So let's go back to board settings. Let's look at swim lanes. And right now we have swim lanes based on queries. If we create swim lanes based on epics, which we'll do right here, we go back to the board. So what it's going to do now is it's going to organize our Kanban board. We're still going to have our verticals, our lists, but we're also going to have swim lanes. Okay. And if you notice here, it sort of broke it down into, we kind of have a hierarchical breakdown here: project charter and stakeholder register. The second one is not here because it doesn't have any child issues. So when we add them, it will actually show up here. But what you notice here is you can see these sort of hierarchical breakdown here. And what you can do is, if you're working on the project charter first and you want to move those tasks through the workflow, you can do so. And then you've got your stakeholder register and any other deliverables. So you can actually kind of create that decomposition view within the Kanban board as well. Okay. Let's go back to our roadmap just very quickly. A couple other things that I want to be able to show you. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that there are some various dependencies. I'll just kind of click on over here. Let me see, put that over in here too. I know this is actually not the right order in the way that things would be done, so I'm not worried about the order. And this is why I ask students to sort of think about how they do the work before they go ahead and map it so that everything is in the proper order. We've talked, or will talk about it in class, in terms of how to create a decomposition. One of the things that I will mention here is that you always want to have the work flowing and representative of the way the work is actually done. And so you don't want to, usually, we read left to right and top to bottom. And so if you kind of are consistent with representing the work in that way, the earliest work is at the top, right? And the latest work is at the bottom. And then similar approach to tasks and subtasks within, top to bottom, what happens first, then happens second, then happens third, fourth, fifth. You may want to have it in that particular order because it makes life a little bit easier. So you want to lay that out that way first. But right here, if you want to create linkages between those epics, you can. I'm sorry, you can see that we're adjusting the timelines here. So we'll just do that. And so now you have the dependencies of those project deliverables highlighted in your roadmap. Okay. Everything else remains the same. I don't want to go through sort of the functionality of moving cards through. You can, again, you can look at this, select it for development, select it for progress. Okay, so you can move those through the workflow. You can maybe have multiple ones that you're working on. Again, this is a collaborative tool. So let's open up our card here, and you want to potentially assign it to somebody so that team members know what they're working on, you can do that assignment here. You can track comments. The other good things in here is you can do all kinds of information. If you want, you can add a note with a particular uh, icon that flags that information a little bit more immediately to your team members, so you can write your information that way. Okay. Um, okay. So we can do that. You can save that. So there's info that you're sharing. If you want to create another comment, you can again tag your team members here. Okay. You can do that. I'll just save that. You can create a comment by, let's say, indicating a status or a date. So say that you're keeping track of what's happening and you want to keep a log of all of the updates that somebody may have made. You can tag a date in here and say completed rough draft, but see attached document for your review and comments. Okay. So again, you can sort of do all that, and now there's a sort of date stamp in there. And this is, I know this may seem for some group work maybe cumbersome, but for more projects that are more elaborate, like the group project that we're going to do in this class, I think this is an excellent opportunity to structure the work that needs to be done, to allocate the work to the team members in terms of how you've decided to allocate the work reflected in here. So who's doing what, and then week over week track your progress, and have a team meeting, have a daily stand up for 10 minutes a day where you kind of all get together and you share progress, make sure everyone is still sort of following the plan and there are no issues or risks that are present, and you can just continue to do that work. And this is an opportunity for you as students to experience, and yes, there might be some pain points, but experience sort of managing a project in this structured, methodical approach. It will give you experience with the tool itself. Even if it's a smaller project, that's okay. The whole idea behind this is to get you comfortable in organizing your project and then sort of managing it collaboratively, and getting a little bit familiar with industry leading tools like Jira and Trello that are used to manage projects within the organization. So on that note, we have come to the end of this particular demo. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see each other in the next demo.